I'd like to introduce our speaker. I know that I'm sorry, butcher that last name. I'm just gonna go with Mike, if you're okay with that. But Mike is a Cowlitz County, excuse me, Pierce County. And I was telling him that I was born and raised in Tacoma, so Pierce County is near and dear to my heart. But when I found out we talked about doing climate change, and Mike was certainly more than willing to talk about this. I know that he was on at the state Master Gardeners meeting that we had just a couple of months ago, and glad to see that. So I'm really looking forward to this interesting talk. Mike, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Your PowerPoint is up on the screen. I can see it, no problem. And it looks like it's ready to go. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. You already got my name, Mike Peranto. The presentation's titled The Resilient Yard, Battling Climate Change at Home. Okay, I'm a Pierce County Master Gardener, and I'm going to set you up with a couple of slides here, and then we'll dive into the topic. All right. First of all, I think you all know what the Master Gardener program is. I also have the mission statement here. I just bring it out because there's a couple of words that jump out at you, at least at me, which is a horticulture and environmental stewardship education. And kind of for us, the greatest challenge of our time right now is the changing climate. So for a program that's supposed to be focusing on horticulture and environmental stewardship, climate change is kind of right up our alley, which is why we put that presentation together. Before we started, I asked Gary if this was all Master Gardeners, and I do understand there can be people from the public. This is a public presentation, but I put in one slide. It's kind of a inside game thing, nothing that anybody can't see. Just wanted to make you aware of the group of us Master Gardeners behind these presentations, okay? About a year ago, a group of Master Gardeners from across the state concerned about climate change decided to get together and kind of break the borders of counties. If you think about it, say I'm Cowlitz County Master Gardener, the way we're organized is by county. But climate change is such a big deal, we thought it would be advantageous to put all of our heads together across the state and create content related to climate change and then make it available statewide. So a group of about 60, 75 of us got together, formed climate action teams, or CATs, and the goal is to enhance the climate change content in Master Gardener, all of our program offerings. The first one is this Speakers Bureau, and we've created about 5 presentations on climate change. This is one in that family of presentations. Okay. The perspective of this presentation, I'm not going to give you, if you've set in on a lot of climate change stuff, sometimes it's doom and gloom. It's kind of the left side of that picture there. That's not what this is about. This is about people who are saying, what can I as an individual do about climate change? Okay. And if you look at it at a personal level, if you break it down the statistics, there's about 3 areas where as an individual you can impact the climate. 1, your home, how you heat and cool it. 2, your car, how you get yourself and your goods around. And talked about much less often is 3, and it's in about 3rd place, kind of how you handle your yard. So obviously as Master Gardeners, that's what this presentation is going to be about. And if you look at the picture, we're going to be focused on kind of the right side of the yard, not the left side. Structure of it, there's 4 parts. There'll be an introduction and overview, which I call Climate Change 101. Huge topic. We're not going to cover everything with just the little smallest parts you need to know about in order to inform the rest of the presentation. Then we take kind of, as this picture shows, just kind of your typical suburban yard as our model, and we break it down into 3 components. How to handle your lawn. Secondly, how to handle your garden beds. And time permitting, at the very end, there's just 1 or 2 slides where we make the argument that if you don't already have a kitchen garden, you should, and it has positive climate impacts. So we're taking on the kitchen garden from the perspective of climate change. Okay, so that's the structure. I'm going to start now, get into the meat of the presentation. And I'm going to start where your typical suburban house starts. This is a picture I took of a neighborhood going up in Gig Harbor about about a year ago. If you look at the picture, it's kind of classic, for Western Washington. You can see in the background a lot. There was probably forest here. It was a forest area, and a builder came in to put in 14 homes. And so the foreground, the focus of the picture, you can see all the trees are gone, which is not surprising because you got to have a place to put the house in. But a little bit more as you think about this stuff, if you look at the dirt, you can kind of see, hopefully on your screens, the color is good. This is not the dark, chocolatey, rich, humusy soil that you think of. Instead, it's gray, no life in it. It's the builders, when they put in neighborhoods, what they do is they strip out basically all signs of life, right? They're taking it down to the hard pan. And if you take it from a perspective of the environment, it's like, why do they do this? Are they trying to hurt the environment? And no, they're trying to build houses. And you and I, we wouldn't want our foundations to crack or our sidewalks or our roads to crack. And the way you do that is you got to get rid of that rich humusy stuff, because that's the stuff that expands and contracts, absorbs moisture and all that stuff. And they want it gone so that they can pour their foundations. Once they've poured their foundations, then we all know what they do, right? They come back and they put in, 1, maybe 2 inches of topsoil. They roll out sod for your lawn, and they try as much lawn as possible because it's per square foot the cheapest stuff to put back in. Have little small beds, and they put a couple of plants in the beds, cover that with bark chips, turn on irrigation, and sell you the house, right? So from a perspective, you went from something that was a forest that had hundreds, maybe thousands of years of growth of storing carbon, and it all got ripped up. And what it got replaced with was something with no thought about its impact on the climate. Okay, so this is brand new houses, but this is kind of the way houses have been built for the last 75 years. So even if you don't have a brand new home, you say, that's not my problem. This is kind of where you started from. I just want that as a mindset. As we all know, life finds a way. Those yards don't die. We managed to bring them along. But from a climate perspective, they're a far cry from what was there before the houses went in. Okay. So I'm starting to throw out terms like stored carbon and things like that. I need to do the climate change 101 to kind of explain myself so I don't lose any of you. So let's talk about climate change. All right. What is climate change? If you look at the picture at left, this is how our planet has been for fairly stable for millions of years, maybe longer. Fairly stable, I say. And that what happens is the sun comes and heats the planet during the day. And then at night, that heat is re-radiated out into space. But a little bit of it's kind of captured in by what's called greenhouse gases. Those are primarily carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Now, those have been around and in the atmosphere for millions of years also. And for that period of time, we were in relative balance, so that the planet's temperature stayed pretty consistent over spans of time. And that's created the, quote, habitable zone in which we live today, right? It's just in the last couple hundred years where you switch over to the picture that's in the middle of the screen, and that is with industrialization. We figured out that you can create energy by taking stuff that was in the soil and burning it, right? Or on top of the soil, take trees and burn them for fires, dig up coal, burn it for electricity, dig up oil and burn it to power our cars, right? And we've done that at such a rate over the last couple hundred years, which in geological time is a blink of an eye, that we've increased the amount of those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and they act exactly what the name implies. They act like a greenhouse and they trap the heat in and warm the planet. It's happening at such a rate that the planet, animals, plants, ice, all of that stuff is having trouble keeping up, and it has negative impacts on our environment. So that's climate change. For our discussion today, the interesting part is that carbon, be it oil, coal, trees, is a fixed amount on our planet. It doesn't, by burning it up, you don't make it go away. All you've done is turn it from a solid into a gas. And it's only as a gas that it heats the planet. So as a climate change strategy, you got two paths to take. Path number one is generate less of that stuff. Don't have it go in the atmosphere in the first place. Strategy two is, gee, wouldn't it be nice if there was some technology that can take that stuff out of the air and convert it back from a gas and now turn it back into a liquid or solid and store it someplace, right? That's when techies talk about it, they call that carbon capture or carbon capture and storage, or that stored carbon that I was referring to. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs out trying to find ways to do that at scale. Right now, there is no cost-effective way to do that at scale by buying a piece of technology. But for millions and millions of years, Mother Nature has provided us a technology that does that. And it's free. And those of you who've been to class, you master gardeners out there, probably already know, we call that photosynthesis, right? So photosynthesis is the process, say that 3 times if you can. Photosynthesis is the process of taking CO2 out of the air, those green leaves. When light hits green leaves on watered plants, it grabs the CO2, gives us back oxygen, and it takes the CO2 and turns it into carbohydrates that plants use to feed themselves. Interestingly, and that feeds the leaves, the trunks, the branches above ground. That's only about 70% of what plants do with the carbs. The other 30% is what they transmit down to their roots and emit into the soil, what are called root exudates. And why do plants do that? The reason they do that is to trigger a beneficial relationship that is now called the soil food web. So if those carbs emitted through the roots and added to organic matter placed on the top of the soil triggers a feeding frenzy with all of the organisms that are right on top of the soil or just in the soil. And perhaps surprisingly, those organisms comprise almost 60% of all life on Earth. Not a lot is known about them, but what they do is they take that organic matter and break it down and incorporate it into the soil. They eat those exudates, and when you feed those critters, they do what all living things do, right? They eat it, they poop it back out, they multiply, they die, life goes on in that soil, and that process of that life is taking that CO2 that was in the air and it's slowly incorporating it back into the soil and building back that rich humusy soil that we had originally carted off. Okay? So strategy one, stop emitting as much CO2. Strategy two, by simply adding plants and compost to your yard, you accelerate the rebuilding of what happened, of the rebuilding of the soil and the carbon on top of the soil that got taken away when your house got built. And interestingly, it's below ground is about 60% of that rebuild. And it's strategically more important because once you incorporate it into the soil, it stays in that soil for hundreds of years unless carted off again. But it stays, whereas a lot of the stuff above soil, it's easy to get burned up or knocked over and things like that. So very, very important to have a strategy to rebuild the soil in your yard. And it's got the side benefits of added water retention and things like that. So it's just a good thing to go. And also happens to help you fight climate change. Okay, so that's the end of Climate Change 101. I'm about to turn to the lawn, but I said I wouldn't give you a lot of doom and gloom stuff, but I slipped in one slide on stats just for your interest. If you're saying, well, it's the climate's heated up a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. Here's a statistic graph showing the last 173 years, it's almost 175 years now. I got to update my chart. But what we've had since 1850 is weather stations around the globe. And NOAA went around and took the readings for the month of June, and they averaged out what the average temperature was around the globe for the last 173 years. And then that average is the zero line, the straight line across that you see. And then they charted year by year from 1850 to 2023. And blue is years that were below the average, and red is years that are above average. And if you look at it, the breakdown's pretty stark, right? From 1850 to it looks like about 1940. So you had a 90-year period where the average temperature was below that zero line. That's 90 years. Then for just about 40 years, 1940 to about 1980, we kind of popped around the average. But since 1980, you can see us kind of skyrocketing above. On the right-hand side, that's in degree temperatures of Fahrenheit, which we use in the United States. And so you see in the last 45 years, we've gone up almost a degree and a half. And what I've seen in the last 2 years, they said set records again. So we're not showing any signs of slowing that growth rate down yet either. And it's that amount of heat increase in that short of time is what plants especially struggle with. I've included a headline from the Seattle Times from a year ago, almost 2 years ago now. And this is really I'm kind of poking at some master gardeners here. I've gotten some people upset by hearing this because one of the answers is a lot of times, especially a master gardener will say, well, just plant a native plant, right? Well, we're heating up so fast that even the native plants are struggling. In fact, they became native back in that 1850 to 1940 time when it was a lot cooler, right? And so here in the Seattle area, Western red cedar is dying off at a record rate. And what do you do? That's a native, right? Do you just replant more Western red cedar that's been dying? And so you substitute native for native and just let it keep happening? What the Parks Department decided to do was replace them with redwoods. Now, redwoods are also native, but they're native to Northern California, right? But somebody's done the math, at least in Europe, they did the math, and they said this amount of change is the equivalent of looking south 600 miles to where the temperature was, 80 years ago, right? So it makes sense. If you look 600 miles to the south, what's the native there? It's redwoods. And so they're trying to get ahead. They're assisting the migration of redwoods up here because they're better suited now for survival in the Pacific Northwest than is Western red cedar. So only bringing it up is I'm not saying do away with natives. I'm not saying change everything. I'm just pointing out that you got to rethink everything because even strategies that say plant natives, you got to be a little thoughtful about it because not everything is going to work here. Okay. There we go. Sorry. Everybody still with me? Please say yes.
Good.
Okay. All right. Section 1 done. We're going to now turn to the lawn. As I talked about, there's 2 strategies. 1, emit less CO2, and 2, capture more. Primary strategy for your lawn is emit less. And let's talk about that, okay? First of all, a lot of climate change presentations will say, oh, you just got to get rid of your lawn. Get rid of it. Well, I'm not doing that here today. A couple reasons. One, I don't think you will. It's too kind of woven into what we think of as a suburban yard nowadays. But I just want to make sure you understand why people are saying that. Okay. So if you took all of the lawns, all of the yards across all of the suburban homes in America, it totals up to some on the order of some 40 plus million acres. That is larger than we dedicate to any food crop in the United States. We grow more lawn than corn, wheat, anything, okay? And we're not doing it for commercial or purposes or to feed ourselves. We're doing it just to beautify our lawn, okay? So it's when they're looking at kind of move the needle kind of things, the lawn is a huge, huge amount of real estate where you can make a difference, okay? And lawns are what they call monocultures, right? We're trying to have, like that picture, just this beautiful green golf course like. All the grass is exactly the same length, perfect. It's perfectly green all year long. And so it's basically a monoculture, and nature hates doesn't hate, nature attacks monocultures. It tries to build in diversity. Climate change goes after it, tries to build in diversity. Diversity is what's going to survive. And so we counter that by doing what? We water the hell out of the lawn all summer long to try and keep it green because when it doesn't want to go green. And we pour more and more chemicals on it to both get rid of the pests and the weeds that attack our lawn. And so what we do is in the lawns, we create this toxic stew that damages our entire yard. And so that's kind of got to stop. We got to take better care of our yards in a climate challenge world. But like I said, I don't think everybody's going to rip up and get rid of their lawns tomorrow. And it's green, got green leaves. It does store carbon. So the focus of this presentation is let's just talk about ways that we can more responsibly maintain our lawns. Okay. And that comes in 3 steps. 1, we got to minimize the CO2 emissions. 2, we got to reduce the synthetic fertilizers that we pour on the lawns. And 3, we got to do a better job of managing how we water the things. All right. Picture at left here, we've got 3 Oregon State University. Somebody did a slice of 3 different lengths of grass, short, medium, and long. And the point here being the roots underneath the soil are proportional to how long the grass is on top. And hopefully you can all see that on your computers. It's staggering difference in the amount of root mass in the left-hand slice than it is in the short slice. And so in maintaining your lawn, step number 1 is let it grow long. A lot of places will say 4 inches, 2 to 4 inches. My personal experience is as lawns get older, it's harder to leave them grow as long because they start to fall over and it's harder to mow. So my recommendation is as long as you can with it still standing up so that you can mow it. Okay. Once you've done that, then step 2, and this is, I just said I wouldn't tell you get rid of the lawn, but I didn't say I wouldn't tell you get rid of the gas-powered tools. They just have got to go, I'm afraid. But the good news is it's an easy transition for us here in Washington to make. A little stat again, I told you I'm from Pierce County. You guys in Cal, there's a study that calculated how much CO2 is emitted by just yard tools by county, and they just took the top 100 counties in the United States. So Pierce County came in at 67, so I was able to be in the study. Sorry you guys didn't make the cut. But in Pierce County alone, number 67, we generated in 2020 180 million pounds of CO2 just through the use of lawn tools. So going electric can have a measurable impact, okay? And why is that the case? California Air Resources Board did a study, this is 2019. They took the top selling model of car, drove it for an hour, ran it for an hour, and calculated its emissions. and compared that to the top selling model of gas-powered lawnmower. And what they found was that a gas-powered lawnmower for 1 hour is the equivalent of driving a car for 300 miles. Now, if you find that staggering, then take a look at the leaf blower. It's the equivalent of 1,100 miles. So these yard tools, they just spew CO2 at CO2 equivalents, but they just spew those pollutants into the atmosphere, those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Now, why is it? One reason is it has never been a regulated industry, so they haven't been forced to clean up. But it's not just neglect. The other reason is they're generally 1 and 2 stroke engines, which deliver lots of power at light weight, and you want to have very lightweight tools to carry around in the yard. So they use the 1 and 2 stroke engines, which are notoriously inefficient in burning the fuel, and especially as compared to a car, an automobile. So I'm not saying it takes as many gallons of gasoline as it is 300 miles. I'm saying after the fuel has been ignited, the pollutants that generate that are left in the atmosphere, 1 hour is the equivalent of 300 miles. As I already said, good news for us. The technology already exists: trimmers, edgers, and blowers. Battery-powered electric work just great for all but the largest of suburban yards. Mowers, I'm told, electric are fine too. I've always used a reel mower, so I got an affection for those. Either go electric or reel mowers. We get a double win in the Pacific Northwest because our gasoline rates are relatively high, and our electricity rates are incredibly low. We're like 40% below the national average for electricity. So all the studies show that if you switch over to electric, you end up saving money nationwide by switching from gas to electric. It's doubly true here in the Pacific Northwest. Also, if you've been sitting back saying, it's not my problem because I got a yard service. Well, we all know a lot of those yard service guys are using gas-powered tools too. And so I do recommend that you have what I call the talk with your yard service provider and just ask them to switch to electric as well. I don't actually believe they will do it. But a lot of this is just about exerting some pressure. The smart ones, if they have, they got 20, 40 customers, if 5 or 6 of them start to ask, the smart ones are going to, even if it's just for those 5 or 6 yards, are going to start switching over. And they're going to have to sooner or later. The goal is to just get them to do it sooner. So we're now spewing less CO2 because we're using electric tools. Next thing we got to do is cut our chemical inputs onto the lawn. And it's kind of the note at the bottom. So I was saying top strategy is cut fertilizer from 4 times a year to twice a year. But the why is you got to get the logic. To create synthetic fertilizer, and I'm talking about the stuff you see in bags after bags in your big box stores. The way they manufacture that generates 4 to 6 pounds of CO2 for every 1 pound that you use on your lawn. And those bags are like 25-pound bags, so that's kind of represents about 100 pounds, 150 pounds a bag of CO2. So if you can cut your consumption from 4 times a year to twice, you kind of cut it in half. That's a big win, right? And it's easy to do. You can, if you just simply save yourself some work and don't rake up your grass clippings, they're rich in nitrogen, and they're also organic matter, which when you fall in the soil, those critters like to tear it up and break it down and incorporate it in the soil. So you save yourself some work. The amount of nitrogen is equivalent to 25 to 40% of the needs of the lawn. So it's the equivalent of at least saving you 1 fertilizing action a year. So I say replace, just letting your clippings drop replaces 1. The other action is simply use compost. Top dress the lawn with a fine compost here in Pierce County, we have something called Tag Grow, Tacoma Grow. It's a nice thin, it's actually a biosolid, but it's a compost type thing you can rake in and feed the lawn. And that's a natural way to give organic matter to feed the critters in the lawn so that they can do what living things do, eat it, poop it out, multiply it, on and on and on. And you're building up the soil at the same time, right? So, so 4 to 2 is relatively easy to do. What's harder I found is the big box stores sell you way more fertilizer than you need. Like I said, those are 25. I went looking and I've got a total of 350 square feet of lawn in my yard. So not a lot, but I got a lawn. Smallest bag without the average bag was 5,000 square feet. I mean, I could look hard to find something 2,000, but there's no way I'm getting 350 square feet of fertilizer for my 350 square foot lawn. So you're kind of forced to way overbuy. And then what do? Well, if you're going, if you're using it multiple times a year, you can save a little bit for the second time. But after that, human nature is, I'm just going to use it up. So we tend to just pour way more on the lawn needs. But here's the thing, if you over fertilize, the lawn doesn't save it or store it up. It doesn't eat, it doesn't gain weight, right? It doesn't overeat. What it does is it just it uses what it can, and the rest soaks into our waterways and clogs the waterways. It also emits nitrogen oxide as a gas into the atmosphere, which is yet another global warming gas. So the tougher challenge is if you overbuy your fertilizer, what do you do with it? The only solution I've come up with, unfortunately, I got a couple of kids. I buy for everybody. I use what I want and I give them the rest. So if you can find a buddy to split the fertilizer with, please do that. Next, moss killers and weed and feed products. Basically encouraging you to stop using those products. Moss killers, interesting one, that you have the moss killers do exactly what they advertise, which is they kill the moss, okay? But once you've applied the moss killer, it just turns it brown dead and it's still stuck in your lawn and it's still choking out the grass, right? If you've got a lot of it. And so what do they say? They recommend is once that you've killed it, then quote, rake it out. Here's the thing. Moss doesn't have a deep root system. You can break it out without first pouring down the iron oxide onto the soil to kill the moss. That's why I've got this picture of this nice little thatching rake. I especially love the ones with wheels. They save my back. And I use that just to spot rake out the moss and avoid the moss killers entirely. And here's the reason why you want to do that. Because moss killers, they do exactly what they say. They kill the moss, but moss thrives in a low pH environment. And the iron oxide that's used to kill the moss actually lowers the pH of your soil. So if you use a moss killer, you start yourself on this treadmill of making your lawn more and more susceptible to growing moss in the future. You are better off adding lime to your soil to raise the pH level so that it's more conducive to growing grass, and it inhibits the moss growth, and then just use your thatcher to get rid of the moss. The weed and feed type products, classic master gardener thing. Most of us, if you look at our lawns, if we think we have a weed problem, we're still talking at most only 5% or 10% of the lawn. You do not want to put a insecticide or herbicide, an herbicide on 100% of your lawn if you have a 5 or 10% problem. It creates unintended consequences that's damaging to your entire yard. So just if you have what you believe is, it's better to just pull the weeds, but if you're not going to pull the weeds and you believe you have a major problem, instead of just automatically going to the weed and feed products, there's this wonderful program where if you got a major issue, you can go talk to a volunteer who will help you with your specific problem, and it's called the Master Gardener Program. That's what you need to do rather than continuing to pour herbicides onto your lawn. Okay? I'm going to move on to watering. Checking my time. I'm talking yakking a little bit too much, so I'm going to pick it up a little bit here. Don't want to keep you guys too late. But the watering strategy is water infrequently and deeply. And why do you want to do that? Because you want the roots to look like that Oregon State University picture where the roots go down deep into the soil, where the soil stays moist in the hot months. Because here in this chart, we in Western Washington have like the blue bars, where you got this big U-shaped thing where watering is not a problem except for maybe June, July, August, and the first part of September. But you got to prepare your lawn for those months, and you want the roots to go down as deep as possible so that they're better equipped to handle the hot months. The rule there is water one time per week, 1 inch at a time. If you got a sprinkler, how do you tell what that is? You do the old tuna can test. Set a bunch of cans out underneath your sprinkler, turn your sprinkler on for about 45 minutes, and then go take a ruler and measure. It's usually about 45 minutes to an hour. And then once you know how long it takes to deliver an inch of moisture to your yard, that's how long you put each setting in the yard and move and work that way around the yard. And again, once a week. If you have an irrigation system, they are marketed as water savers, and they can be if, and here's the trap there, at least in our neighborhood, new neighborhood went in the same time. Everybody has irrigation and have a service come and turn it on and off. When those guys come to turn it on, they set it to run every day for 10 minutes, okay? So you're getting 70 minutes a week. It's not the length of time. It's what they're doing is they're training the roots to just sit around the soil surface instead of go deep. So you need to go in and see what they set it to, and you need to switch it. I'd walk it out to twice a week for 30 minutes, and then eventually to the once a week for an hour, okay? So we did the 3. Emit less CO2 by getting rid of the yard tools, cut back on the fertilizer, optimize the watering. This is your bonus material. If you don't have one of these, please get one. Yard waste. The big thing here, and you may not in your county, in our county, they're provided, but find some place that composts yard waste. You don't want it to go into the landfill, because if it goes into the landfill, what they do is they just cover it with dirt. And if you cover organic matter and let it decompose without dirt, it emits methane. That's the third gas we were talking about. And methane heats the environment 80 times worse pound for pound than does CO2. Now, CO2 stays in the atmosphere for thousands of years, methane only for 20 years, but you still don't, if it's an easy way to keep methane from forming, just compost it, okay? So I'm done with the yard. I've been talking for a long time. Are there any questions? I don't have the chat here. We go. When I have it like this, I can't see the chat. Okay, there's nothing here. Does anybody have any yard questions real quick? I'm only gonna take 1 or 2, and then I'm gonna hop on just in the interest of time. But if anybody, just raise your hand or speak up right now, unmute yourself. Everybody cool? All right, I'm gonna keep going then. Back into presentation mode. Oh, it kept it there, but now, I'm sorry. Me and technology, I lost my, I lose my cursor when I go in presentation mode. All right, here it goes again. All right. So we're going to move from the lawn to the garden beds. Okay. And when you move to the garden beds, you're switching strategies. Okay. Foot by foot, you can capture and store more carbon in your beds. All right. So we're going to move from emitting CO2 to now carbon capture and storage. Start back like I show you that picture of the new development going in. I took an imaginary picture from the internet of what a forested area in Western Washington would look like before we got around and started yanking up all the trees. And it looks like this, right? Think about that. If a sun's eye view with those plants, what they do is they race to capture every ray of sun. In climate change terms, what they're doing is they're fighting to be the dominant thing to capture and CO2 and extract it from the atmosphere, return oxygen, and use it for its branches, leaves, and trunks, and building up the soil, right? So forests are machines for CO2 capture, okay? And their strategy, as I said, if they try and capture every ray of sun that they can if left alone from spring through fall, because they're triggering that photosynthesis and the soil food web action. But it also, interestingly, for what we just talked about, it helps with water retention because everything is shaded and weed control, right? So forests, if left alone, kind of balance themselves out pretty nicely in nature, and they've historically done a good job of helping suck CO2 out of the atmosphere. And as we know, we've kind of interfered with that, but take that thought process and let's apply it to your yard, okay? So here's another picture, and you can kind of tell it's a new development, went in 2017, 2018. You can tell from the top it was forested, but this is kind of the same thing what it looks like from the sun's eye view after you put a house, roads, driveways in. So practically, we're never going to replace all the CO2 capturing capabilities of a forest in the suburban yard. It's just not practical. But that doesn't mean you don't try and optimize the space that you've got, okay? So, and the way you do that is you take the same kind of strategy. And actually one advantage you have is it may seem like a daunting task, but most yards are broken up into beds. And so you don't have to redesign an entire yard. All you have to do is take one bed at a time and apply the same principles and just work your way through the yard season by season, year by year. So strategy is you want the leaves to capture as much of the sun rays as possible from spring through fall and leave as little bare soil as possible. Went all the way around. Acknowledge that because you got a house, you want to maintain sight lines and you have to work within the confines of a pre-designed yard. So you just do the best you can, okay? So I'm going to describe quickly kind of what that process is. If you go bed by bed, first thing you do is decide, you know the orientation of the beds, right? Different beds need different plants. If it's on the north, then it's going to be in full shade most of the year, except in the heat of summer, sometimes it can fall into sun. East gets the morning sun, south gets the full sun, and if it's close to your house, it gets that bank shot, so it gets double. And west gets the setting sun. So there's different plants are optimized for those environments. Also, I said I'm sneaky. I said I wouldn't tell you to rip out your lawn, but I didn't say you couldn't minimize your lawn. And a perfect opportunity to do that is when you go bed by bed. You don't have to replace the lawn, but you certainly can shrink it down. What I learned about myself in doing these presentations is I've been mowing my own lawn for going on 60 years now. And there was something about me where there's always this border between the grass and the beds. And what you have is over time, the shrubs and trees grow up and they start to encroach on the grass. And there's something in me that I always felt like that borderline, you always let the lawn win on that border battle. And so I was always cutting back my shrubs to make them fit in their bed. Nothing wrong at all with once or twice a year, just snipping off 6 inches of lawn and let the shrubs expand out as they mature and shrink your lawn that way. It has the added benefit if you got two shrubs next to each other, you give them another 6 inches, there's room for another plant between the two or ground cover, and you can kind of slowly just migrate your beds larger that way in a very natural way without having to do anything radical work on your lawn. So please consider that. When you're devising a planting strategy, what you need to do is think in layers, because what you're trying to do again is you're trying to maximize the leaf coverage, leaf exposure to the sun as best you can on a bed by bed basis. And so this picture goes kind of whole hog and defines 7 layers. I kind of just keep it simple. There's 3: tree layer, shrub layer, and ground cover layer, right? And if you go stand back and look at your bed, if you've got a lot of empty space and room for a tree, you go from big to small. So see if there's room for a tree layer first. Then you fill in below that with your shrubs, and then you finish off with ground covers. And you're trying to cover the whole thing over time, right? Um, and this picture, if you the title, kind of the layers is imagine the sun there, and it's shining down on the picture because we're in the northern hemisphere. The sun that's the orientation of the sun in the sky. By having these layers and tucking plants in underneath each other from north to south, you can get better coverage on a bed by bed basis. I hope that makes sense. So you're going from tallest to smallest, north to south. And if you are in a wildfire prone area, though, you do have to make sure that you leave enough gaps so that you're not creating any ladders for wildfire that go from small to big. Okay. And you're also theming your yard by bed with whatever you want. Now, if you're used to a Master Gardener presentation where you give you laundry lists of plants to choose from, this is not that. We don't have time. But the internet's great for that. All I did was I kind of listed a couple of themes areas. You can go native and encourage that. Remember what I said about the 600-mile difference, but I'm not saying change out, go entirely Northern California natives. Just be open to looking south to some native plants and try and incorporate them in and see how they do. Okay. I used to call it xeriscaping, which are hot, dry water plants that can use a little water. I was told by somebody in Spokane that xeriscaping was a term pioneered by Denver. In Spokane, they call it Spokane-scaping. I don't know what you guys call it in your town, so I just call it regionscaping. You can also do pollinator gardens, rain gardens, or permaculture, which is the incorporation of food throughout your yard, i.e. a food forest. If you want to dive deeper on that, I do recommend this Nature's Best Hope. It kind of is going much further than what I'm saying here, and he's taking the position that you need to treat your entire yard as a way to help regenerate nature. I'm just focused on climate change, but very worthwhile read. Not lastly, moving more towards action. Time to get your hands dirty. When you're ready to plant, please remember the fundamentals. You're always about building better soil. And you also need to diversify your plantings to mitigate climate risk. Just like they say when they talk about investing your money, watch out, you don't want to put it all in one place because you can get wiped out by something. Same thing with plants. You want diversification, especially in a changing climate. On the soil improvement strategy, we already talked about it. Add compost whenever you get a shot. Add some compost, plant, and mulch to protect the soil. Okay, and you're doing it because you're trying to trigger more photosynthesis, more exudates into the soil to trigger your soil food web, and that builds up that soil, that it retains water, retains nutrients, and is good for the soil. On the diversification, photo at left is what your typical builder kind of puts in. They love thujas, and they plant those monocultures, and it creates problems for you. One is like this picture here. What happens if something dies? It's pretty obvious, and it's pretty hard to replace because you got to try and find a plant of the same size, and then you're perpetuating the monoculture, right? You want to migrate over time to more like the picture at right, where you've got a large diversity of plants. In a changing climate here, if 10% of that dies, you probably don't even notice it. The eye doesn't catch it, as opposed to the picture at left. But the advantages are it's reducing your climate risk because it can withstand losses better. And also, we talked about trying to cover all the gaps, and across time, you can plant plants that flower at different times and attract different pollinators at different times of the year. So you have more flexibility in designing your bed by going the diversification route. And it attracts predators, which are great because they prey on your pests. And so you're kind of returning some balance there, and you don't need as much chemicals to keep your beds in check. You let nature do it for you. And last but not least, you don't need as much fertilizer, and you got improved water retention. So it's a win all the way around. And timing, last piece here. Now I'm on the last slide for this section. And I'm trying to keep us on time, folks. I know we got about 5-6 minutes to go here, so I'll zip through here. But basically, in this slide, broken it down, spring through winter. Spring is the time to amend your soil with compost and plant your shrubs and ground covers according to the plan that you devise to get maximum coverage. Summer kind of peaks up as the time to focus on making sure you got it mulch coverage to prevent evaporation and focus on your watering strategies. Fall, if you picked off one bed in the spring and you got a lot of work to do, you can be more aggressive and double down doing a second bed in the fall. Don't try and do it in the summer. Puts too much stress on the new plants. Also, as leaves fall on the lawn and on the beds, leave them on the beds, rake them off the lawn and stick them in the beds. You don't have to pick them up either. They give you a little mulch and they give more food back into the soil. And in the winter, same thing. Look for covering bare soil, protect it. Best time to plant trees is late winter. And also in the winters when you're homebound, that's a great time to work on your plan for the next year. So that's the strategy for your garden beds. I got one last thing to go, and we don't have time to dive into any depths, but I just want to make the argument that in a modern yard, a veggie garden should be a staple. The analogy I use is we talked about battling. We're using climate change battling in a military kind of terms, and if you carry that through, a veggie garden is like a victory garden. World War II, they talked about you had to help the effort by growing a victory garden. Similar kind of strategy here. If we got this battle going on, the ability to take some of those 40 million acres and turn them into food production is strategic in a changing climate. And there's here's why. First of all, our worldwide supply chains for creating food are under stress right now, okay? Now, some of it's due to wars, some of it's due to COVID, but underlying all that, and increasingly, it's due to climate change causing greater variability and causing crops to fail, and it's happening at an ever-increasing rate, okay? Selfishly, that leads to inflation in food prices. If you want to help fight inflation, grow some food. Okay, simple. Reason two is those supply chains. You know, we got conditioned to believe over the last 75 years this food production has turned into a worldwide system, right? We got conditioned to believe that, hey, I should have a fresh raspberry on my cereal in January, right? To do that, those aren't grown here in the Pacific Northwest, right? They've shipped from all over the world. And the average distance food travels to your plate is just under 1,500 miles. 1,500 miles. So if you start a kitchen garden, you've got a much shorter supply chain to deliver food to the table. Okay. Second reason is, and commercial agriculture is under stress too. Okay. They generate tons and tons of CO2 in the growing of our commercial crops. And, they're built around tilling of the soil, which damages the soil and needs to stop. Vast monocrops, which we now know nature doesn't like monocrops and tends to attack them. So they counter with herbicides and pesticides and all the same stuff we talked about in our yard. These guys have an exponential scale in the commercial agricultural sector, and they have to reform too so that they generate less CO2. But they've got the problem, I call it the changing your engine in flight, right? They can't produce less food because people need to eat. So they're under terrible stress trying to reform their practices in such a way while maintaining the productivity. So one of the things we can do to help them out, we got those 40 million acres, let's just grow some stuff for ourselves and take some of the pressure off. Interestingly, a lot of the stuff that we grow is some of the most, like these leafy greens that you're looking at here in the picture, commercially, those are some of the most heavily treated crops, and we can grow them in very climate friendly ways without any pesticides or herbicides or any of that stuff, and just walk them into our kitchen. And in doing so, we'll help pollinators, improve our soil, store carbon and all of that. So just an appeal, please. As you're thinking about your yard, as you're thinking about climate change, one of the more fun things to do is grow your own food, and it will help the planet. So that's it. You didn't think I'd make it? 12:59, baby. Resilient yard, quick summary. Lawns, the strategy is to minimize your CO2 and how you maintain your lawns. Garden beds, start a redesign work to maximize your CO2 capture. And the kitchen garden, dive in there to help out your fellow growers and take a little stress off of our supply chains. That is it for me. I will stop share now, but there is one, if for those of you master gardeners out there and you're interested in climate change, there is a little recruiting pitch here. If you would like to become a cat, send me an email and I'll get you on the list, and you can join our little team here. Gary, I'm turning it back over to you, or I'll take any questions that anybody has. I think I got rid of the screen share.
Okay. I'm picking one up chat from Cheryl, and she says, great presentation. You mentioned letting the shrubs win by stripping away a little lawn under that. What is the best way to remove a strip of lawn?
I've started doing it, and it's just, I call it the half moon tool. There's just, it's just a little blade shaped half moon, and the beauty of, you can just dig along, and beauty of only doing 6 inches at a time. Grass is heavy and hard to get rid of. When you're just doing a little bit like that, I turn it over, I knock as much dirt out, and it fits in my yard waste bin. But by doing 6 inches at a time, half moon tool, and then just fork it up, it's not too tough to do.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Everybody, I mean, several great presentations here, Mike, in the chat. No other questions at this point.
Right.
Anybody else out there? Please.
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, Mike.
Go ahead.
It's Roman.
Go ahead, Roman.
There can't be any doubt that humans have accelerated climate change. But what do you think about the natural rhythm of if there weren't any humans? Would this be happening anyway? I'm from the East Coast, and we've had at least 2 periods of glaciers. First one was before humans. The second one, they were hunter-gatherers. There was no huge population, nobody burning coal, certainly. And so what would happen what do you think the humans are contributing? Can you give me a
So-
percentage or a rough idea?
Actually, I'll answer it in a slightly different way, but well, let me try and answer. What I've learned in my readings is we kind of overlook the time scale when we talk about that. In other words, there was one, oh, the one that stunned me, the meteor that hit the Earth and changed the whole climate, and we kind of think, oh, that happened in a couple of years. No, they thought, well, the climate change happened like over a 50,000 year period. So the issue we're talking here is the fact that what we're contributing has been only in the last two, significantly only in the last couple hundred years. And it's that speed is the issue more than percentages, right? Because plants don't have time to adapt. And we're trying to get through this whole thing without any loss, with as little loss of life and all that stuff as possible, right? So I put it more not in percentages, but that things are happening so fast, we need to try and help slow things down a little bit. But you're right, if you look over millions of years of time, there's been other drastic changes in the climate, ice ages and things like that, but they usually are spanning over thousands of years of time, not a couple hundred.